It's time for another Dice Tower review with John Richard.
Howdy gamers, greetings from Indianapolis, Indiana, the gaming capital of the world. It's time for another board game review with me, Indiana John. Today we're taking a look at Nations the Dice Game, which is the dice game version of Nations the board game. Both of these were designed by Rustin Håkansson, and this is just basically a distilled version of the rather long and complex board game Nations, but there's a few twists to it as well. So let's take a look at the setup and gameplay of Nations the Dice Game, see if we can answer that important gamer question: is it fun? So here's the very colorful setup for Nations the Dice Game. Every player is going to get their own player board, which has 5 spots on it for buildings, and each building is represented by 1 white die. So you're going to start off with 5 white dice in the game. You also have a spot here for a wonder that you might be working on, and a spot for a leader. You're also going to have this big open area here, which is considered your non-active area or your discard pile. So as you're using tokens and dice to do things in the game, you're going to be putting them into this area as sort of your spent or discarded pile. There is also a player round overview card that has some information on it. So that's good information, but it's also going to indicate where you are in the turn order, and it's also going to be the card that you're going to use to pass at the end of every round. Or if you're wanting to speak French while you play, je passe. Where there's also a centralized scoring board. There's 2 tracks on the scoring board. One's for victory points. The other is for books, which is sort of a race in this game where you're racing for knowledge, and you'll get points based upon how far you are along this track and how many points you have more than another player. Talk about that in a little bit. And you also have an area for an event token, which is going to be some end of round extra points you might be able to get depending on what resources that you have. You also are going to have this progress board, which is where the tiles are going to reside that you're going to be purchasing or conquering to get onto your board. So there's 3 rows there, and we'll talk about that when we get into the buy tiles phase. But this is the basic setup here. There are 4 rounds in this game, and so 4 sets of these tiles. So you're going to lay out, laid out the set here for phase 1 or round 1. You also have some very colorful dice that you're going to be upgrading during the game, and a bunch of tokens that you'll be able to get. You'll set all of this stuff up and decide on a start player and begin. Let's take a look at a single round of Nations the Dice Game. Before the first turn gets started in Nations the Dice Game, every player, you're all going to roll your dice, all 5 of your dice. And just get 1 roll, and then the first player is going to take the first turn. What you're going to do is you get to do 1 of 3 things on your turn, and then it'll go to the next player, and you'll continue going around and taking actions until all players have passed. So on your turn, you can do pretty much only 1 of 3 things. The first thing that you can do is re-roll. Like I said, you're going to roll 1 time, and you don't get any re-rolls to start off with here, but everybody does start off with 1 re-roll token. And you can spend that token on your turn to re-roll 1 or more of your dice. You can re-roll all of them or re-roll part of them, any dice that have not been used. So that's one thing you can do on your turn, is to re-roll to get some symbols that you want. The second thing that you can do is you can buy tiles, and that's where you're going to buy tiles off of this progress board. The cost of the tile is either going to be in gold or in military strength. So, and then the amount of the cost is printed on the left side of the tile, and it's multiplied by whatever row the card is in. So all the cards in the tiles in the first row here are going to be 1 times whatever the symbol is. So these 3 cost 1 gold each. This one costs 1 sword or military strength. So in this case, I've got 1 gold on my dice here, and you start off with 1 gold token here too. So I have 2 gold total. So I could buy anything in this row if I wanted to, or I could buy something in this row that costs gold. Each of these cost 2 gold. Each of these costs 3 gold. So you can buy a tile, and when you do that, you just will take and move that to your used area, whatever you're using, and then you're going to take this and whatever tile you buy, and you're going to put it onto your board. Now, there are 4 different kinds of tiles in this game. The first we'll talk about is leaders. So for a leader tile, you'll take that and put it into your leader area. This leader is Sun Tzu here, and then you're going to get whatever the benefit is that is on the bottom of the tile. In this case, I'm going to get another reroll token. So then I'll take an additional reroll token and I'll put it in my supply there to be able to spend on a later turn. If I ever lose this leader or replace it with another one, then I will lose that token and I'll gain whatever the benefit is of the new leader. So that's leaders. The blue tiles are buildings, which you're going to use to cover up one of the 5 building tiles that you already have on your board here. And then what you're going to do is pretty much upgrade your die. So in this case, I can take and put it here, for example. They're all the same, so it doesn't really matter where you put it. And I'm going to basically trade out a white die for a red die. And so I would just take one of these dice. It can be one that I haven't used yet, or it could be one of the used dice. So I could actually use the one that I bought it with, and I can trade that out and then get a red die. At that point, I'll then immediately roll that die, and then that will go into my pool to be used later on in the round. So that's what you're going to be doing in this game a lot is to be upgrading those dice into the more powerful dice. So the basic dice just have one symbol on each side. The different kinds, there's 3 different kinds of upgraded dice, the yellow, blue, and red, that are going to have a different distribution of things. The red one has a lot more swords on it. The blue one has a lot more books and stone value. And then the yellow one's going to have more food and gold on it. So however you want to build up your resources, you can trade out those dice in that manner. So that's the second thing that you can do. The third type of tile, that's the second type of tile. The third type of tile is the colonies that you can conquer. And in this case, all you would do is spend a military strength equal to the number of swords times the row that it's in. And then you're going to put this just next to your player board. It doesn't have a place on the board there, and you're going to get whatever that benefit is. So in this case, I'm going to get 1 stone token for colonizing Hindu Kush. So that's the colonies. The fourth type of tile is the wonders. And this is kind of a 2-step process. You're gonna buy the wonder for whatever the gold value is here. In this case, I've got the pyramids, which cost a couple of gold here. And they're gonna go into my construction area for building the wonder. I don't get any of the benefit from the wonder until it is built. And so then on a later turn, I can actually work on a wonder. And that's the third thing you can do on your turn. I mentioned you can re-roll, you can buy tiles, or then the third thing you can do is you can build a wonder. And so in that case, after the wonder's in the construction area, then you have to spend this amount in stone in order to actually build it. So I would have to have a die with stone on it, or have some of these stone tokens, and I would turn those in, and then I would be able to put my wonder out next to my player board, and then it's completed. What that's going to do for me is it'll get me whatever the benefit is here. In this case, I would get a gold token for this pyramid, and then I would also at the end of the game get 2 victory points for that wonder. So anything with the little laurel symbol there, that's going to be victory points. So that is pretty much how the game is going to work, is you're going to go and take one thing at a time, one action at a time, either re-rolling dice using a re-roll token, you're going to be buying tiles, or you're going to be working on wonders that you have on your board there. And then you'll pretty much go around until all your dice are done, or you don't have to use all of your dice, you can choose to pass, and then once all the players have passed, then that is the end of the main phase, and then you'll move on to the scoring phase. So after all the players have passed, then you're going to perform the scoring phase of the game. It starts off with the production or scoring of books. You're going to look at any books that you have on your dice that you haven't used, and you're going to score book points based upon that. So let's say he gets 3, and let's say the other player got 1. Then you're going to score points for those books, and you'll get points equal to the number of players that you have more books than. So in this case, whoever is in the lead in a 2-player game is going to get 1 point for beating that other player. The second player is not going to get any points. So in a 3 or 4-player game, there'll be a differing number of points based upon the books. So that's what books are going to do for you in this game. Then you're going to go on to the famine phase, in which case you're going to look at the top part of this event tile here and see what the food requirement is. In this case, it says says one food will get you one victory point. So if you have a unused food, in this case I don't, then you would get one victory point. Otherwise, you just don't get victory points. Now, it's not 1 point per food, so if I had 3 food, I wouldn't get 3 victory points. It's either you have it or you don't. This is a little bit more forgiving than the board game, Nations the board game, in which case, if you didn't have the famine requirement, you would lose resources and lose points, and lots of bad stuff would happen. Here, it's a lot friendlier. You either get the points or you don't. After the famine phase, you're then going to do a switcheroo of the player order, and you're going to hand around these cards, and it's based upon military strength, which is number of swords that you have that are left over that you haven't used in your active pool. I've got 1 in this case for the red player. So you'll trade those around. If there's ties, then the previous round's player order is maintained. But you'll do that player order, and then we'll do the war phase, in which case you're going to look, very similar to the famine, at the military strength, the number of swords, and you'll get points based upon that. So if I had 2 swords, I would get 1 point. Again, I've only got 1 sword here, so no points for me. So at the end of that war phase, then that's pretty much the end of the round. You're going to move all of these tiles off that weren't purchased and deal out the next age worth of tiles. You're going to take all of your dice that you were in your used pool, and you're going to get those all back and get all of your tokens back too, so that you can use them again. And then you'll start by everyone rolling all of their dice, and then the start player, the number 1 player, will begin and will do actions. So the game will continue in this fashion, just going around and you'll do this 4 times. And at the end of 4 rounds, whoever has the most points will be the winner of Nations the Dice Game. I'll admit it, I'm a pretty huge fan of dice games. I really like the mechanic of rolling dice and using them to do things, of maybe having player powers or cards or tokens and things that will mitigate the dice luck and get you to sort of do the things that you want to do on a turn. And so, dice implementations of board games I think are pretty interesting in the way that they're able to take the mechanics of a board game and distill them down into a dice version. Pandemic the Cure is a great example of a game that I really like that is a dice version that gives you that same feeling of tension that you have in Pandemic, but in a dice form, which I really like, and so it makes it shorter. Nations is a very long, the board game is a very long and complex board game. Multiple hours, very tight, very tense, a lot of competition, a lot of direct player interaction regarding the wars that you play. So this game is a much shorter version, of course, and I find that what they've done with the dice game is they've stripped out all of the tension. And so it's a very unoffensive board game. I don't really have, or dice game, I don't really have anything terribly bad to say about it. It's, you roll dice, you upgrade your stuff, you get points, here and there, but it doesn't have that cutthroat, real tense element to it. You don't feel like, the economy doesn't feel quite as tight, and you don't feel like you're really competing that much for those best tiles on the board. I just felt like the decisions in the Nations of the board game are just painful sometimes, as far as, and painful in a fun way of, trying to make sure that you're optimizing what you're trying to do. In this game, I just sort of felt like there just wasn't that much tension in it. So I think it's a decent implementation. I think the mechanics are sound. It's always nice when the designer of the board game will do the dice game version, so he has that same kind of buy-in, I guess, to the whole idea of the game. But I sort of found this one to be just sort of middle of the road for me. So I think there are better dice implementations of board games. There are far worse dice implementations of board games. So I'll kind of give this one a middle of the road review. I think it's pretty fun, but I think that it's probably not one that's going to stay in my collection. So that is Nations the Dice Game.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.